Here we are, Living Environment fans. It's Tuesday. Yeah, terrific Tuesday. And we're studying ecology now in Living Environment class. And in particular today, we want to talk about counting because important unit in ecology is the population. So the population is the total number of individuals living in a given area. Now, if the given area is small and the individuals are fairly big, that's easy to do. You just count. Right, like I can count the number of kids in a classroom. That's pretty easy, okay? But what's a challenge for biologists is when the areas get large or if the individuals are really small, or the worst is if they move around. They're the hardest to count. Today, let's learn how to count. Da 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 do 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 da 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 do do. All right. Da 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 do do do. Hey now. Da 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 do do. Mr. Kovacs class. It's really fun. It's Mr. Kovacs class. You might learn a ton. It's Mr. Kovacs class. It's interesting too. It's Mr. Kovacs class. And he's super cool. It's Mr. Kovacs class. The count. One little biology student. Two little biology students. Three little biology students. Four little biology students. That's how many are paying attention. Thanks, count. Let's learn how to count, right? We can count populations. The first questions we ask in ecology is how many are there? How many alligators are in the Everglades? Or how many deer are in the Adirondack Park? Or how many deer are in New York State? Or how many alligators are in New York State? Or how many deer are there in the United States? Right? These are questions that we usually ask, and then that tells us something about the organisms living there. How many? Okay? And there's different ways to figure out how many. The simplest, of course, is just to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh my gosh, look at all these. I don't want to count them out, man. Right? Sometimes counting is too prohibitive. Like it's overwhelming. Like there's too many individuals to count. Right? Like there could be 1 million flamingos in here. By the time I count them all individually, some may have died because it took me so long to count, right? Or some may have babies and now I've got to count more of them. I mean, it's really hard to count big populations. So there are a couple tricks of the trade that we're going to learn today. The real method that's used by ecologists is to sample. They take samples, so small portions of the whole, to use that to predict what the entirety is. All right, so sampling is pretty easy to do, right? Sample size, like if this hive of honeybees, if you know how big the hive is, right? Let's say you know the hive, let's say is, 3 feet by 4 feet, so it makes it 12 square feet. You could just count the bees in 1 square foot and multiply by 12. And that would tell you how many there were total, right? Because it's like we're using a sample, a small amount, right? Sample size, right? We use sample, count the number of dandelions in a small portion of the soccer field, and then figure out the relative size of the soccer field. Sampling. Of course, the more samples you take, the more accurate your count is going to be. The larger your sample size is, the larger the actual area of your sample size is, the more accurate your count is going to be. So what biologists normally do is they take multiple samples. Like if they want to know how many dandelions in a field, they'll take, if the size of a football field, maybe you'll take 10 or 12 different samples, right? And you'll take them in random places, and you'll count the number of dandelions in each place, and then you'll figure out an average number of dandelions per unit of field, and then multiply. So there's some fun math. All right. Here in New York, we usually don't count things statewide because we recognize there's different habitats. So we have what are known as wilderness areas, or wildlife management areas. Right? There's Clinton County actually is like divided kind of into two. The Adirondacks is made up of 5 wildlife management areas, right? And so DEC, Department of Environmental Conservation, personnel are in charge of their area and figuring out how many, like in this case, how many deer there were in the area. One way they could figure it out is, well, how many deer were killed by hunters, right? That would tell you some places more deer were killed by hunters than others. That would tell you there's probably more deer there. But it doesn't give you an exact number, right? So in our deer management, we tend to use for like deer also, we need to know populations, how many deer there are, so we can figure out how many hunting permits to give, because that's the number one way we manage deer populations in New York State, okay, is by giving out hunting permits. Okay, so yeah. So how do you know how many deer are in New York State? Okay, you could just do an estimate, but the problem with deer is they move. Okay, they move, and when organisms move, like deer, we have to do a different kind of sample called a mark and recapture. Basically, what you do is you go out and you look for organisms, you capture them, then you let them go, and then you try to capture them again. And you do a little math, it can tell you how many organisms there are. Right? Let's see, right? But the idea is like if you can capture a small amount of the population, mark them, let them go, and then go out and capture another small set of population, and some of them are marked, that would tell you that the percentage of marked organisms relative to the population size. That's in a nutshell. All right? It's easiest to do in places where the populations are going to be fixed, like in a pond or something, right? So you want to know how many fish in a pond? Go out and capture a few, right? Just a few fish. Tag them, mark them somehow, put them back in, and then go back later and catch fish again. Some will probably be marked. Some will not be marked. The ratio between marked and unmarked will tell you how many fish are in the pond. Right? How do you mark? You just mark them. Sometimes with paint, like these crabs, or a lot of times wildlife biologists will use bracelets or necklaces, or yeah, here's an anklet for owl for counting populations. That's why they do that, so they can estimate populations. They tag individuals, they collect data on individuals, and then they let them go, but they're marked. So if they ever get caught again, it can be used to estimate population size. Just a brief intro to counting. One brief introduction to counting. We'll do some practice in class today. And yeah, by the end of the period, you should have an idea of how to count large populations of animals that move over large areas, how to get an estimate of what that population would be. All right? We'll talk again later.